Sunday, the Sunday games, the noon, starting with a good old revenge game to kick us off here, which is in Atlanta, where the Falcons are favored by 2.5, hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Potential Arthur Smith revenge game here, John. Who do you have here, and for how much?
I'm gonna be going with Pittsburgh, surprisingly here, for 100. Once again, I'll just say spoiler right now. I'm putting 100 on every single game. I'm just keeping it standard. I just don't know how confident I feel in specific games or teams or matchups yet, because as you see with the NFL season every year, things can get wildly different than preseason expectations. So I'm just doing the standard 100 on every team. But I'm going with Pittsburgh here over Atlanta. Pittsburgh, typically the thing that tends to kind of hold this team back is injuries. And early on in the season so far, we're not dealing with a lot of those. I do think that Arthur Smith, although I have many critiques of him, certainly is going to understand how to attack that defense. Obviously, they've made some additions during the offseason, but how to attack that defense, considering that that's the defense that he coached over the last handful of years. So he's going to know some of the players' weaknesses and strengths. And then just overall, I think it's going to be a tight game. I can see Atlanta winning, but like I said, I think it's tight. I don't know if they win by a field goal. If they do, I think it's 1-2 point game here. And even on the other side, I could see Pittsburgh winning like a really grinded out kind of game. Although I think that Atlanta is definitely going to be improved this year. I still think that early in the season, new quarterback, new coach, a lot of different changes on the defensive side in terms of new additions. We haven't really seen Kyle Pitts or Drake London have like that big breakout moment quite yet because of, unfortunately, the quarterback and coach situation previously. So we still need to kind of see them come into their own realistically. So I just think there's a lot of new stuff in Atlanta, and for Pittsburgh, there's some new stuff too. We do have a new offensive coordinator. We do have a new quarterback. But I think that this is going to be a classic Pittsburgh game. Defense, run the ball, and keep it close.
Yeah, I concur, because also I think it's important to note, just to add on what you mentioned, Kirk Cousins. He's coming back. His first game, but he didn't really get much even preseason time with these guys. I know he's got practice and such, but it's always different when the Bullets are live, and especially a team like Pittsburgh. I kind of mentioned this earlier, where kind of Kansas City, where it's just hard to game plan off them because Pittsburgh's going to do crazy things. And I know Atlanta's team is talented, but yeah, it just feels like every year, if I recall correctly, except for last year, they got blown out by the Niners, best of the Niners. But even like the year before, I believe they beat Buffalo, or it was a very close game. So week one.
I think the year prior to that, they beat Cincinnati. It was that game where Joe Burrow threw like 4 picks, right?
Yeah, it's coming off that great year they went to the Super Bowl. So yeah, like Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin, I know everyone, like there's a certain group of within the community or following of football that, I don't know, just doesn't like him or hates him, has a weird vendetta, but he gets his guys ready, as we know, and especially for week one, they're ready to go. So yeah, I just feel like, especially added with this fuel, I wouldn't be shocked if Arthur Smith is, spice stuff, got a few extra plays as well, just to kind of stick it to Atlanta for firing him, and we'll see. I'm sure. Russ will be able to handle, those plays, and Pickens is awesome as well. They have playmakers and a solid running back group. So, yeah, I'm going with Pittsburgh as well. Only 400, just because, like you mentioned, it should be a close game, and it's still the Pittsburgh factor that they could, just muck this up somehow. Anyhow, moving on down to the Chicago Bears, they will be at home. They are favored by 4.5, hosting the Tennessee Titans. Caleb Williams' debut in front of the home fans, and obviously Will Levis finally getting to be fully the guy. So who do you have here, John, and for how much? Oh, I already know it's 100, but who do you have here?
Yeah, I'm putting the 100, and I'm actually going to go with the Tennessee Titans here, and here's the reason. Chicago favored by 4.5. I think this is somewhat of a projection. Once again, I'm not fully bought into the Chicago going to the playoffs, all this kind of stuff this year. I think that obviously I love the additions they made in the offseason, Keenan Allen, Caleb Williams, a lot of these guys they brought in, but at the same time, I need to see it before I really start investing that much. And, one of the key reasons why is when we look at this like slate of games this week, there's only 3 games in which there is a bigger point spread for the favorite than this game right here. And those 3 games are Buffalo, which I guess there's a little bit of a spoiler alert because we haven't actually talked about any of these, but Buffalo, Arizona, and that's like one of the worst teams in the league versus one of the best teams in the league. Cincinnati versus New England, and Cincinnati, when healthy, one of the best teams in the league versus New England, one of the worst teams in the league. And then, the primetime game, which includes the San Francisco 49ers on one side. So the fact that like those are the only 3 games, what are the things they have in common? We're talking about some of the best teams in the NFL historically over the last handful of years. Chicago has not proven that they're one of those teams to me yet. Now, there are a couple other 4.5 point spread games, but even some of those games, I like the favorite versus, the other team a lot more than I do in this one because Tennessee, I think they can be a solid, feisty team, and I'm just still not sold that Chicago, once again, is going to be a guaranteed, we're going to the playoffs, we're competing for the division title, all that kind of stuff yet. So week 1, I'm going to take it slow on Chicago. I'm going to take Tennessee for the 100. And once again, even if Chicago wins, there are avenues in which Tennessee can still cover. And so, yeah, I'm going to be taking the Titans here.
I'm right with you. I'm taking Tennessee, and this is no bias as a Packer fan. As many know, I'm usually pretty objective. For many of the same reasons. Like, I feel like there's a bit of a projection. We still don't know how well, this Bears offense is going to be. And it's a very important stat, like where I saw on, it was like the number 1 draft pick quarterback starting his first start usually it's like 0-14-1. It was very yeah. So and once again, not that I doubt Caleb Williams, but it's always tough for getting thrown out there. And I think as well, like you mentioned, how we're all kind of there's some especially that are gassing up Chicago, trying to make them the next Texans. Like Tennessee, not that far behind in regards to that. They have a young quarterback, and they have, they recently got a new toy in Calvin Ridley, and, maybe a little bit more retooling, but I'm sure they are a little bit hungry as well. And I feel like they have a chip on their shoulder, and we'll see just how they both fare. But yeah, I think especially with Brian Callahan, it's a new offense, so hard to anticipate what he's going to bring out now that he's head coach and is in charge and such. So yeah, I'm going Tennessee. I think they keep it close nonetheless and scrappy, but I wouldn't be shocked as well if they just pull off the win outright. But yeah, I agree with your sentiment in that maybe we're a little jumping the gun. And once again, maybe this line changes. Important to note, we're doing this on Wednesday the 4th, so sometimes these lines change as we get closer to the day. And the other, I guess, the more experienced gamblers wise up or wait for the line, my favorite line. I don't know exactly. So anyhow. Both going Tennessee for the standard 100 there. Moving on down to Miami, where the Dolphins are at home. They are going to be favored by 3.5, hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. We know you got 100 on this, John. Who are you picking here?
I'm going to take the Dolphins. Simply put, the Dolphins over the last handful of years, and specifically even Tua, they're really good at the beginning of the season. They're really good, and it feels like when McDaniels is able to kind of have this playbook where, okay, the defense has no clue what we're doing. I just think that he's going to come out cooking. I think that Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, the whole running back group, I think they're going to look really strong. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. And for Jacksonville on the other side, I'm not quite sure they can keep up as of yet. I also am not quite confident that their secondary is going to be able to stop Miami's passing attack. So, yeah, I feel confident in Miami here. I'm going to take them, even though it is the 3.5, which means a field goal would not be good enough to cover. Like I said, I think it's a high-scoring affair, and I'm not sure that Trevor Lawrence and that receiver room are going to be up to the task yet. They can get there, especially if Brian Thomas Jr. really comes into his own, but in week 1, especially on the road at Miami, we know how hot it can be over in that stadium, especially with the sun bearing down on the opposing team's bench. I'm going to go with the Dolphins here for 100.
All right, well, our first disagreement of the year will be now because I'm going with the Jaguars for 100. I think they'll keep it close. I worry a lot about Miami, both sides of I mentioned in the breakdown, their offensive and defensive line. And if there was one way to get to the Jaguars last year, their line wasn't great, but I just feel like, especially at the current state that Miami is, I think that's advantage Jacksonville, and I'm sure they'll have a little more emphasis on the run game. And I think Trevor Lawrence especially will feel a little motivated to come out. I know both him and Tua got paid, but I feel like there's a little more grief over Lawrence getting paid, in regard to his extension. So I feel like Jacksonville's gonna have a chip on their shoulder because last year was supposed to be their year. It wasn't. It kind of fell by the wayside. and I think they'll want to come out at least to start and have some fresh new ideas that the Dolphins haven't seen. And important to note too, Miami, the first season under their new defensive coordinator as well. So I just feel like there could be some miscommunication, some issues there for the Dolphins defense. I won't be shocked if Miami does win because, like you mentioned, outside of Tyson Campbell, I'm not sure who's going to make an impact for Jacksonville in the secondary. But I'm hoping that maybe Hines Allen, I fear could create some havoc, maybe make a play or two. Nonetheless, though, taking Jacksonville, give me the 3.5. Even if they lose by a field goal, I'm very comfortable in that. But I guess my bet of 100 shows I'm not too confident because, it could be Jacksonville, could be an ugly game like you kind of foreseen. So we'll see who comes out on top in regards to that first disagreement between the both of us for the theoretical battle of Florida there. Anyhow, moving on down to the game you mentioned previously, biggest spread of the weekend, and it is the Bengals at home. They are favored by 8.5, hosting the New England Patriots. It will be Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Unsure if that'll really move the needle for you, John. So who do you have here for 100?
I'm going to go with Cincinnati. Just simply put, I don't really believe in New England. They're running Jacoby Brissett out there with the Drake May factor. Maybe if he has one of those kind of like crazy entrances into the league like Justin Herbert did or something against that Chiefs, in that one game that he started, then maybe there's a chance that like New England could surprise people. But at least with Brissett, we know what we're getting. And with the rest of the Patriots, not much talent on the roster. Once again, barring like a Jalen Polk breakout or something like that. And so, just simply put, I'm taking Cincinnati here. I also think that Burrow and a lot of this offense, Jamar Chase, which I don't know if Jamar Chase is actually going to play. I think his status is actually currently in doubt. But I guess apart from him, Burrow, T. Higgins, a lot of the guys are going to be hungry to kind of rebound after last year and want to be, show the league that they're definitely one of the best teams in the NFL. And, what better to do it than against an unfortunate New England team, especially at home. So although it's the biggest spread of the week, I'm believing in the Bengals here.
Yeah, just the better team, especially in regards to Bengals defense versus Patriots offense. It's just not much that gives me hope in regards to New England. And on the flip side, you mentioned all the good things about Cincinnati. I do want to point out, too, last couple of years, they've started off slow off the gate, granted, a couple of injuries and stuff, but I'm sure that's in their mind that they need to start off have a good start to this season. And obviously it helps when you open up, like you mentioned, against the lowly Patriots. So, I'm putting 150 on Cincinnati. So this is one of my first different non-standard bets just because, I am a little more confident that they'll get this done, even without Jamar Chase. As you mentioned, still have T. Higgins. I'm excited to see what they do with the run game, and especially with a little more revamped offensive line. Maybe they'll be more patient. So we'll see how it all plays out. But we're both in agreement with the Bengals over the Patriots for 8.5. Moving on down, keeping it in the AFC. First, for our first road favorite here is the Houston Texans. They are favored by 1.5 points going to the Indianapolis Colts. Who do you have here, John?
I'm going to keep it simple here. I'm going with the Houston Texans. I know that when it comes to the home field advantage, typically you spot a few points towards that team, but quite frankly, in terms of roster construction, I just don't like what I'm seeing for Indianapolis when it comes to this matchup. We've got Houston with C.J. Stroud coming off a hot rookie year. We've got Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, the receiver room versus that secondary. I really think that Houston's going to, come out here in Indy and probably light it up when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. Joe Mixon also, although I have my critiques about his efficiency, we've talked about how Indy quite hasn't found a lot of difference makers outside of DeForest Buckner. Like they have solid players, but haven't really been able to find like a true key guy. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure on Buckner, not only to try and stop the Houston run game with Mixon, who once again, largely critique his inefficiency, but at the beginning of the year when you're fully healthy, that's probably the most efficient you're possibly going to be. But also to try and get pressure against C.J. Stroud, despite the fact that Houston's actually got a pretty solid line. So, I think that Houston's going to come out firing. I think the 1.5 point spread is pretty low here, considering how different I view these two rosters. I know that Indy almost made the playoffs last year, but that was that was a different roster. We have some changes. We've got Anthony Richardson, who I'm still a little hesitant on, considering he's only started 17 career games since high school. So, yeah, I'm going to take Houston. I'm going to take D'Amico Ryans and those guys to come out strong.
I concur. I'm agree. I go with you. I'm going with Houston also. I'm also putting 150 on this, showing I'm a little more confident because I'm a little surprised. I think, like you alluded to, that Houston isn't favored by a little bit more. Because I am concerned. Who knows? Like Richardson, you mentioned that. I mean, he only technically started 4 games last year, and some of them he didn't finish. And important to remember too, when he came out, still kind of a raw guy, and missed some throws, mechanical stuff. So I wouldn't be shocked if he comes out and it's a little bit of a struggle offensively, at least in terms of throwing. But yeah, I think Houston, especially the Houston offense versus Indy defense. I mean, we talked about it like that. I worry a lot about that poor secondary going up against against that passing attack, because I'm sure that once again, more talent added to it. Also important to note too, offensive line, at least as of right now, week 1, perfect, healthy, something they didn't have last year for a good portion of last year as well. So that is very important, and I'm sure that they'll be able to kind of handle whatever the Indianapolis defense throws at them. So yeah, I'm extremely confident that Houston, is going to kind of want to a little bit rise to the expectations, at least to start the year. You want to do so. So I'm going with the Texans, as well as John, to cover that 1.5 point spread over the Colts in Indianapolis. I've been moving to an NFC matchup. It is the Minnesota Vikings, led by good old Sam Darnold, favored by 1.5 points, going to the New York Giants. Who do you have here, John, in this matchup?
I'm going to go with Minnesota here. I don't know. Just simply put, I think that Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, some of the top guys in Minnesota, I think that they can get it done here against this Giants team. I think without Saquon Barkley, there's going to be a little bit of an offensive identity crisis early on for the Giants. I think that Malik Neighbors certainly, like I said during our offseason preview, can fill the gap when it comes to a lot of those explosive plays that they're going to be missing, but I think it's going to take some time. I still don't really believe in Daniel Jones, and despite the fact that I have almost no faith in this Minnesota team long term throughout the season, I just think in this first week, I think that they can maybe get it done. So as you can maybe tell by the hesitation in my voice, I don't really feel confident, but I don't feel confident either way. So I just kind of coin flipped it realistically. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, this is a really tough game to pick. That's why I only put 50 on this one. So people that are doing math, I would have to have a couple more 50s. So yeah, I'm going 50 on the Giants, mainly because I feel like they're at home. I just a little bit of I factored into, like, Brian Daboll does have familiarity playing against Brian Flores back when Daboll was the Bills offensive coordinator and Flores was in Miami and probably New England as well. So I feel
just by the way, this actually does somewhat strengthen your point on that, because I don't think we mentioned this during our offseason preview the other day. Daboll is actually officially taken over play calling duties, which I don't think he had last year. So
that's even bigger. So we'll see how much more of an imprint he may have on the offense. And I wouldn't be shocked with the Giants if there's a little bit of. I just feel like they have a little more of a sense of urgency in regards to the whole off season, and obviously all the criticisms of what's gone on with Daniel Jones and that. I just feel like there's a little more urgency there. While Minnesota, especially lost their guy in JJ McCarthy, I just feel like there's gonna be a little bit of a slower start from them. Just once again, this is just me shooting from the hip. I'm not in their building at all, but I just feel like the Giants more sense of urgency there. But I'm only putting 50 on them, so that shows my level of confidence. And yeah, like John mentioned, this is just this was literally a toss-up game, and so one of the reasons why I was willing to shave some off this one, because we'll see what happens. But ironically, this is our second disagreement, and they add up. So anyhow, that's that. We'll see how those two fare. Keeping it in the NFC, though, let's go down to New Orleans, where the Saints are favored by 4.5, hosting the Carolina Panthers. So who do you have here, John? And I know we obviously know for 100 though.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Saints. I got to see Carolina show me something before I'm going to start putting bets on them. Just going to be real. I don't know how much they were covering last year, but I can imagine it was not a lot. And with the rosters, like even though I have question marks about the Saints, they still have a lot of veterans that at least I know what I'm getting there. Guys like Cam Jordan, who I know can come out and produce early. So even Alvin Kamara, so I'm taking the Saints, even though I don't really feel that confident that New Orleans is going to be great this year. Like I said, it's Carolina, so we're going with New Orleans.
Same. I'm going with New Orleans. I'm putting 150, so putting a little more than the usual 100, just because very similar. I'm very concerned with Carolina's offensive line. Gonna have to show me, and like you mentioned, that the Saints defense especially stole a lot of veterans, and Dallas Allen. It's not like a completely new head coach he's seeing because Canales was previously the Bucs OC, so I'm sure that there's some familiarity with what they're gonna get, and may have some special game planning for that, and especially on the offensive side. Yeah, I'm sure we'll see, but I'm sure that the Saints offense will want to get off to a good start, especially the offensive line a little bit reshuffled as well. But we'll see. But like we mentioned for the breakdown for Carolina, like not especially now that Brian Burns is gone, not a lot of game wreckers on that defense. So yeah, that's why I'm further emboldened to put more money on the Saints. So we'll see how that fares for the both of us. And the last noon game is the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo. They are favored by 6.5, hosting the Arizona Cardinals. Who do you have here, John?
I'm going with Buffalo. 6.5. Feels like Buffalo can get a touchdown. They're at home. Arizona, they've got some turnover. Yes, they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., but adding one wide receiver that can be, a potential star in the league does not solve all the problems that Arizona does have. Sure, fantasy-wise, we like some of the pieces they have, McBride, Harrison, Kyler, James Conner, etc. But defensively, I still don't really think they've got much of a defensive line that can put a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. Even if they did, Josh can be mobile. I don't think they quite have the secondary to really try and expose Buffalo's relatively young and new wide receiver core that they've got going with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, these kind of guys. So yeah, I think that Buffalo is going to cruise here against the Cardinals.
Same. I'm going with Buffalo. Only 400 though, just because it's 6.5. You never know. With this, I got scared of the points just because. But Buffalo's offense not as explosive as last year, obviously. But yeah, I still have faith that they'll move the ball against the Cardinals, and yeah, of course with Josh Allen too. That helps in regards to some of the off-script stuff. And on the flip side, while I don't love the Buffalo defense, yeah, I'm with you. I just think that they'll do enough to slow down Arizona's offense. Still. Kyler had some time last season under the offense, but now he had a new piece, and sometimes doesn't always flow all the way right away in regards to that, and especially at Buffalo as well. So both going with Buffalo Bills for 100 to end the noon games or early games. Now we move on to the later afternoon games on Sunday, going to LA, where the LA Chargers are at home. Air quotes are on home because they notoriously don't have great home field advantage. They're favored by 3.5, hosting the Las Vegas Raiders for a Week 1 divisional matchup. So who do you have here, John, in regards to this matchup?
I'm going with the Raiders. I really think this is going to be a gritty game. We know that with the Chargers, they have the change at coach. They're bringing in Jim Harbaugh. They draft a guy like Joe Alt. They bring in Gus Edwards and all these different running backs. And I do feel like the Chargers are going to want to come out and they're going to want to establish their ground game here. And I think the Raiders are going to potentially want to do the same thing. We know that the Raiders have been a very ground-heavy offense for quite some time. They're also a very gritty team. But at the same time, on the defensive side, I feel a little more confident in, which I know is potentially crazy, in at least a guy like Max Crosby making a big difference here in order to keep it close than I might with the Chargers, just because like Joey Bosa coming off the injury, all that kind of stuff, Khalil Mack only getting older, et cetera, et cetera. So I still think that although we have had the change, right, with Harbaugh, and although they did make an offseason to try and, start to build the team in his image, I don't think it's quite there yet. And I still think that at least, when it comes to the Raiders, we could see a solid Zamir White showing with them trying to pound the rock. I think that, yeah, both teams will try to keep it relatively basic offensively, although I think Justin Herbert is the far superior quarterback. I just think that, yeah, these teams are relatively close in terms of talent. And when that's the case, especially when the Raiders are getting 3.5, especially when it's in LA, and no offense to Chargers, but they don't have the biggest of fan bases that shows out. I'm going to take the Raiders here for 100.
Yeah, I'm also going the Raiders. I'm going with them for 50. I mean, the main point you hit on that I really want to expand on is, I mean, although, yes, change and, boss man and such, still have issues with the Chargers' size. They didn't really, I know they dressed that in a way, but didn't really do a huge overhaul, and they couldn't because cap-wise. So, yeah, I just think the Raiders, like you mentioned perfectly, just in terms of physical battle, I'm going to choose the Raiders at this point because they showed us last year that they were willing to live in this type of game, and they love that, and playing that type of ugly, defensive struggle. And most of the times they came out on top and made more plays and, were willing to thrive in that. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that Harbaugh physical mindset has fully set in yet. Obviously, you got to get a couple of games, couple of losses / wins under your belt to kind of start getting that going. Well, yeah, the Raiders, they're, like you mentioned, kind of built in Antonio Pierce's image, just further along at this point. So more confidence in that. So yeah, both going the Raiders, different amounts. John 100, myself 50. But moving on down to the Seattle Seahawks, they are at home. They are favored by 4.5 points, hosting the Denver Broncos. So who do you have here, John, between these two?
I'm going to go with Seattle, although Denver, once again, we just talked about the Chargers and a lot of the change they've made. Although they didn't make a change at head coach, a very big change when it comes to the fact that Russell Wilson era is over. We brought in Bo Nix, all this kind of stuff. I still think there's just a lot of young pieces and question marks when it comes to Denver. Basically, the entire wide receiver room, apart from Cortland Sutton, we don't quite know what we're getting yet. Even the running back room, although Javonte Williams is a veteran. What's the split look like between him, McLaughlin, and how good do either of them really look? There's just a lot of things that I have question marks about with Denver, even on some of the defensive side of the ball, like the front seven I don't feel super confident in, especially ever since they traded Bradley Chubb. Like, how good does Baron Browning look? Really, the only things that I feel super confident in when it comes to the Broncos is kind of just not even things, just really just Pat Surtain, quite frankly. But the problem is you're going against Seattle, who has a deep wide receiver room. Sure, maybe Pat Surtain, maybe they tell him to go follow DK Metcalf, which I don't expect to happen. But let's say hypothetically they did. You still got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who a lot of people are feeling this could be a breakout season for him. You still got, the dynamic running back duo of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. You still got a really solid offensive line that you've got to deal with. Once again, I said I don't really love the Denver front seven, and I feel like Seattle could win in the trenches there. And then even on the other side of the ball for Seattle, we saw the ways they've tried to improve the defensive line with guys like Leonard Williams being brought in. And for Denver, it's just a young quarterback. I'm not fully confident in the run game as of yet, and so I think that if Seattle can win that war in the trenches and can just get pressure onto Bo Nix, I think that Seattle can come out here with the win. And once again, we got to talk about the fact that we're playing in Seattle. Very tough environment for a rookie quarterback to start their career. So I'm going with Seattle for 100.
Yeah, I concur. I'm also going Seattle for 100. I just want to follow up on the point you just mentioned on, not a fun place to play. And on top of that, too, like Mike McDaniels. Mike McDonald coming over his first year there, but he throws a lot of exotic blitzes, or not blitzes here, especially coverages, too. He's very good, very much like Sean McDermott in regards. He's going to throw a lot of weird and odd just zones and have guys kind of, in, for lack of a better phrase, just in the right spots. Like, he has very good tendencies to know. So I just feel like for Bo Nix, you mentioned all that noise. You're going to have to be dealing with, play calling, which, I mean, I'm sure he can, but just all those factors on top of each other just don't spell success for me in week one for him. So I wouldn't be shocked, puts up some solid numbers, has some good moments, but like we both alluded to, I just think Seattle a little more proven commodity on both sides. And offense still relatively the same, and a healthy Geno Smith now, because remember last year he was hurt for the last good portion of the half of the season as well. It's important to note that, as well as their tackles as well, the Cross and Lucas, which I don't think they may have Lucas, but they should have Cross to start. So and then the revamped defense, of course, will be fun to watch. So Both got Seattle 4-100 to cover that 4.5 point spread over the Broncos. Moving on down to your game, John. Your Dallas Cowboys favored by 1.5 going to the Cleveland Browns. So who do you have here, John?
I'm going to be real. I'm taking Cleveland. I don't quite think that Dallas should be favored in this game. We're playing in Cleveland, and if Dallas is favored on the road, this would imply that Dallas, is a couple points better than Cleveland on a neutral environment. I'm just not quite sold that that's the case yet. Cleveland had a solid year last year. Now that was Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson coming back from injury. But even then, when Deshaun played in the few games that he did, he looked solid. He wasn't quite, the previous Deshaun Watson, who was like an MVP level candidate, but he looked good. And I feel like with DaRon Bland out, there's still some question marks about, like Jordan Lewis is probably the nickel back. Does he play on the outside opposite of Trayvon Diggs? Trayvon Diggs in his own right is coming back from an injury, so there's some question marks in terms of the secondary there. New defensive coordinator and Zimmer, new linebacker and Eric Kendricks. Just some turnover on the defensive side that I'm wondering, can they really deal with Cleveland, especially once again, a lot of the teams historically that have given Dallas some problems, like San Francisco, they win in the trenches and they win with size and power. Cleveland's offensive line is certainly one of those offensive lines with Bitonio, with Teller. They're two great tackles, Conklin and why am I blanking on his name again? I blanked on it the other day. Jedrick Wills coming back from injury. Although they don't have Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford looked good last year, so I don't think they really have to commit to Deshaun having to, dice up Dallas. But like I said, if they do, who knows about the secondary? So, I just think that ultimately I don't love the line here. If Dallas was an underdog, I'd feel a little more confident taking them. I still think there's absolutely an avenue for them to win this game. But even the fact that, I just don't know how the run game for Dallas looks with Dowdle, with Zeke, that kind of stuff. So I don't know if they can really try to exploit Cleveland on the interior of the defensive line. I don't know. And then ultimately the biggest reason that I'm a little worried when it comes to potentially this game is the fact that we've got a rookie left tackle. We've got Terrence Steele at right tackle, who was not great last year, and they've got Myles Garrett. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Cleveland here for 100.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't know if it makes you feel any better. It depends on. I'm getting all the spreads from the lines, and once again it's Wednesday, so it can move. But some it has other multiple different spreads from different sites. Mm-hmm. So some sites have Dallas, Cleveland favored over Dallas. So yeah, just that's a line that might shift, but. Nonetheless,
even then, I'm imagining they have it close, right?
Yeah, it's only one or two, so it's 1.5, 2.5.
And so even that would indicate that they believe that on a neutral field, Dallas is better. Which once again, I just don't quite know if I'm bought in yet. I feel like they're, in my mind, they feel neutral, and you're right now. So yeah.
Anyway, I'm going with Cleveland. I don't have much else to add. What you said, I only put in 50 just because I'm still scared of Deshaun Watson, what to expect from him, and hey, this is a fresh Dallas defense. Maybe and those tackles you mentioned coming back from injury, so there's a little bit of a caveat why I'm a little bit scared. But nonetheless, yeah, you had all the main points in regards to the trench battle. Just it's a like you said, it's a matchup thing where Dallas has had issues with that in the recent history. So we're both going Cleveland to at least cover that spread. So we'll see if they do so. Moving on to Tampa Bay next, where the Bucs are at home. They are favored by 4.5, hosting the Washington Commanders and number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels. So who do you have here, John?
I'm going to actually go with Tampa Bay here. Initially, I had written down Washington, but I don't know. I think I just got to see it when it comes to the Washington offense. Don't love the wide receiver depth outside of Terry McLaurin. Don't really love the tight end room until maybe Ben Sinnott kind of starts to prove himself. I think that Brian Robinson is really good back, but I also don't really love the matchup considering you're going against a space clogger like Vita Vea. I don't know. Yeah. Tampa Bay certainly has a lot of question marks. We talked about the corners. We talked about, some of the turnover when it comes to key veterans, or even, a guy like Devin White leaving. But simply put, I still have a lot of question marks about Washington, and at least with Tampa, I know what I'm getting offensively with Rachaad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, even Baker Mayfield at quarterback. So just feel a little bit more confident in Tampa to just to start the season than I do with Washington, even though I think Washington should be improved compared to last year.
Yeah, I concur in regards to pick. I think the Bucks will cover the spread, and yeah, like you alluded to, I just don't have much faith in the Washington secondary, and especially like you mentioned, the weapons that the Bucks offense has and the consistency they showed last year. I'm thinking they'll pick up where they left off, and then yeah, like we've talked about it, and we'll probably won't be the last time. Hopefully not. Maybe I'll be wrong, but at least for now, just no trust in the Cliff Kingsbury offense, and yeah, especially against a defensive coordinator like Todd Bowles. He's going to throw different blitzes and such. So once again, that's on the rookie thing. Is Shane Daniels going to be able to identify all of them? I don't think so. And I feel like it might have a little bit of a tough going. At first, I think they'll still put up some numbers, but ultimately, I think I just have more faith in Tampa. So that's why I'm going 150 on the Bucks to cover. While John, once again, going the standard 100 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to cover that 4.5 points. So hopefully they do so. Anyway, that's the last afternoon game. Going to the Sunday night game now. It is the Detroit Lions at home, favored by 3.5, hosting the LA Rams. So a playoff rematch from last year. And of course, half Stafford in Detroit once again. So who do you have here, John?
I'm going to be going with the Rams. And I'm a little hesitant because last year, I thought the Rams were going to beat the Lions in the playoffs in the wild card round, and that didn't happen. But it's to start the season. I think that McVay is going to have some stuff cooked up, a little bit of a revenge game because although Detroit did go on to play a couple more games, LA still has the taste of that defeat in their mouth. So I think that they're going to, come out strong. Luckily, they're going to be healthy with guys like Cooper Kupp coming back, and because he played in that playoff game, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't 100% last year.
Yeah, he was banged up throughout the year, and it wasn't quite Cooper Kupp. And so, simply put, yeah, I just feel a little bit more confident in the Rams to at least cover here, considering the spread is 3.5. But I don't know. Like I said, Detroit did handle them the last time I said this, so maybe if you're actually betting real money, go against me. Maybe I'm a jinx. Maybe I overestimate the Rams.
Yeah, well, I hope not, because anyway, I put 50, so if it does work, so if you are a jinx, then it's okay. I put 50 on the LA Rams also. I ultimately, it's just the points for me, like you mentioned. I think that, the Rams offense will be able to move the ball, although one of the reasons why I didn't put more / fear that Detroit may run away with this one is obviously, we saw Rams had issues on defense, I mean, especially size-wise, and then now they lost Aaron Donald. So, and then who knows how their secondary is going to be too, because now, Jameson Williams, should be a big year for him. I don't be shocked if they give him a couple of plays, and he did have moments last year in the playoffs once he kind of started getting going. And we know Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporte are awesome, as well as the run game. So, I'm just kind of banking on the fact that the Rams, I expect a little more fight out of them, at least offensively and punch. And also like some new pieces too, like we mentioned in that offseason overview in the Detroit secondary in regards to Carlson Davis and such. So could be some miscommunication that McVay may try to take advantage of, or just lack of chemistry thereof that he may expose. So we'll see how that fares, if the Rams can get a little payback to start the season, or we'll get punched down by the Lions in Detroit. But let's move on down to the last game of week 1, the Monday Nighter. A little bit of deja vu, as it is the San Francisco 49ers favored by 6.5 points hosting the New York Jets. So obviously we get a chance to see Rodgers in a Jet uniform for the second time. So anyhow, John, who do you have here between these two?
I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. I still have some concerns when it comes to the Jets. Specifically on the offense, the wide receiver depth outside of Garrett Wilson. Does that make them one-dimensional? The offensive line, specifically in the interior, and even on the tackle spots, we do have some veterans that I like. Tyron Smith, love the guy, but I just have some general concerns when you're going against a powerhouse like San Francisco. especially when it's Kyle Shanahan in week one and he's had a whole offseason to cook specifically for your defense. Now, their defense certainly is good, but I think that a lot of the strengths of their defense, somebody like a Sauce Gardner, can get potentially phased out just in the way that San Francisco is going to want to play the game. And I think that's going to be a lot of Christian McCaffrey, and I think that's going to be a lot of throwing away from Sauce Gardner. So, yeah, I feel confident in the Niners here in prime time. Maybe the Jets surprise me. I know the Jets have had a lot of high expectations ever since they got Aaron Rodgers, but even with Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't really truly had the chance to build a ton of chemistry with these guys outside of simply in practice. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the Niners here.
All right. Well, I'm going with the New York Jets. So that's 3 disagreements for us. So no matter what, we'll have a leader going into week 2 between the two of us. But yeah, I'm going with the Jets for 100 though, keeping it standard because I am scared of just a little bit of the unknown factor with the Jets offense. Don't know what to expect. Obviously with Rodgers, almost 2 years removed from playing football. I know, he played 4 or 5, whatever how many snaps he played last year, but that wasn't much. And a little bit to what you alluded to, like he never really slayed the Niners demon, even in Green Bay. So I just wouldn't be shocked if there's a little bit of struggle there. One of the reasons though why I'm picking the Jets is I expect Robert Saleh. He has familiarity against, obviously, with Kyle Shanahan being in the building with them and, being in their DC. So I think he's going to have a good idea of how to slow down the run game. And I worry, too, about San Francisco, just them starting a bit slow. McCaffrey's been dealing with an injury in preseason, obviously the Ayuk situation, and even even Trent Williams. I know it got resolved, but they're just coming back now. So they haven't had much time to be cooking or getting back on track. And being ready for week 1. So I fear they could kind of be slow out of the gates, as well as that defense as well, just because we mentioned that defense lost a bunch of key guys. I know they still have some studs, but lost a bunch of key guys in Armstead and no Dre Greenlaw as well to start the year. So some tough losses and tough shoes to kind of fill for week 1, especially against an experienced guy like Rodgers. So we'll see how that all fares for the Niners versus Jets. So I won't be shocked Niners win, but like I said, 6 points. Give me the Jets. I think they at least keep it close and make it tough on them. So